This video is sponsored by the idea of buying an overpriced piece of first generation technology that, while is really cool to experience, doesn't have nearly enough content on it to justify its price. It's kind of like buying a massive flat screen 28K curved smart TV, and the only thing you can watch on it are movies featuring Tyler Perry. Sure, some of the movies are pretty good, but most of them are pretty lackluster. But for the first time ever, us Vive users are gaining our first AAA gaming experience, our first Leonardo DiCaprio film, if you will. And that game is Fallout 4 VR. Now, since Fallout 4 is a 2-year-old game, this video isn't really a review of the Fallout 4 base game. If you want to see a review, there's literally hundreds of them you can see on YouTube. But, just for the uninitiated, here's my quickie review of Fallout 4. Fallout 4 is a good game. Why is it a good game, you ask? Its strengths are that it's a large world, there's lots to see, lots to loot, and lots to shoot. It's not so great a game because beyond the main quest, none of the characters or side quests feel like there's much meat to them or much consequence. So thus, sometimes it doesn't feel like there's much of a point in going and visiting locations besides to gain resources or to level your character up. Now, saying all of that, I still play through this game like 5 times. 3 times the completion, actually. So clearly the game does something right. So I guess now the question is this game worth re-experiencing from the new perspective? And is this game worth re-buying at a full $60 price tag for the same game pretty much that we've all experienced before? And I am glad to say that the short answer is yes, it is. So 2 quick things before we jump into the game. Number 1, here's some of my system specs. And please note that I'm going to be reviewing this game on the HTC Vive. I have heard that it does work on the Oculus Rift plus touch. However, I'm not going to confirm or deny that in this review. The second thing is, I'm going to be showing footage that I've recorded throughout this review. But please note that the footage you're going to be watching is not really representative of what the experience is like actually wearing the goggles and being in the world. Think of it more of a reference to what I'm saying, rather than actual game footage that you should be critiquing yourself. But with that out of the way, let's just jump right into this review. The very first thing you will see is a cutscene, and then you'll be looking at yourself in the mirror. I was even a little surprised there was going to be any character customization in this game, but you get to choose whether or not you're male or female, and you choose from one of the 12 default looks that the game provides with you. And I think this is pretty much just to customize Sean to kind of look like you. So, you can't customize the characters beyond just choosing the default, so just choose the one that looks the most like you. Then you're going to be walking around in happy little pre-war America. In this section, you chat with some people, some bombs fall, some shit goes wrong, and eventually you come out the other side of the vault 200 years in the future. So, you emerge from the vault, you stare out into the wilderness, and it finally dawns on you that the full Fallout game is here in all of its post-apocalyptic glory. Now let's chat quickly about how the VR systems work in this game. There are plenty of settings to make the game as comfortable for you as possible. My biggest recommendation to everyone playing this game is switch from teleportation to locomotion and never look back. The teleportation really doesn't work very well, as the distance you can teleport is very short, and if you teleport beyond that distance, it uses your AP as if you're sprinting. Also, please note that the teleportation in this game is more of like a dash, where you point at the ground and then you see your character swiftly move to that spot, rather than the more comfortable blink type of teleportation where you teleport to a spot and then the game goes black for a moment and then you just kind of appear there. So it's not even going to, this teleportation method isn't really going to even help people who have motion sickness. So I would recommend you just switch to locomotion and get used to it. Luckily, if you do get some motion sickness from locomotion, there's this setting that makes it so these black blobs come out from the side of your screen which help to get rid of some of the peripheral vision. I think the theory is that it helps people move around better if you don't see that peripheral vision, but I turned it off because I just found it quite distracting. However, if you do get some motion sickness, that might be very useful for you. That I'll mention including left-handed mode, being able to project your Pip-Boy in case you don't want to hold your hand up the entire time, and having a sneak mode that actually activates when you crouch in real life. And these things are all up to you to turn on and off, which is really nice. The Pip-Boy is a massive change in the game as well, because in order to use it, you actually have to hold your wrist up to your face to look at it. As well, the Pip-Boy no longer pauses the game. So for example, if you're in the middle of a firefight, and there's some raiders coming at you, and your health is low, and you want to eat some food to regain your health, you actually just have to find cover in order to use it. The game no longer pauses at your convenience. One gripe I have with the Pip-Boy, and all of the menu settings in general, is that the select function jumps back and forth between being the trigger and being the center button on the trackpad quite a bit, and it can take a little bit to get used to. As well, the trackpad in the Pip-Boy feels very loose, and it feels like if you happen to slide your finger slightly over to the right or left, it's going to be changing menus when you don't really want it to. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but I didn't find it being too much of an issue, but I could see why some people could get quite frustrated with this system. When you do finally select the gun you want, sometimes through pure luck, you now have full range of motion as to where you want to aim that gun. You also use your melee bash by just swinging your gun in front of you, and it works actually quite well. It should also be noted that all weapons are only one-handed. That includes everything from the pistol to the minigun. It's a little ridiculous when you see yourself carrying around a minigun with one hand, but I get why they did it. Your other hand's for the Pip-Boy. Gotta keep that hand free. Melee weapons in the game work fine. You can do the thing where you just wiggle in front of you and you'll keep hitting the enemy. If you are a melee player, you might find that a little bit frustrating, but as long as if you're a player that usually sticks to guns, it's not that big an issue. VATS is back and bigger than ever. In the base game, what happened was time would slow down, you pick your targets, and then you see like this playback in slow motion from all these angles. You can't do that in VR. So this time around, it's this slow motion thing where when you aim at an enemy, you can see where the bullet's going to go on their body, and you pull the trigger and it hits them there. It's actually really cool, and actually a really smart workaround to the limitations that VR has. Looting works well enough. You can, if you just point at something you want to loot, you can, the quick menu will pop up. You can just use your finger to slide down that and pick the stuff you want out. Or if you want to, you can use your left hand and actually pull up the menu physically, which will pause the game, which is nice. As well, it's a lot of fun actually to pick up any item you want to in the game, and you can like fully examine it and move it around. I had a decent amount of fun just throwing some shit up in the air and trying to catch it on the way down. The last thing I'll mention about the controls for now is when you're moving with the trackpad and locomotion, you go forward based off of where the wand is pointed, not based off where the headset is pointed. So if you are pointing in this direction and you are pushing forward on the trackpad, you will continue to walk forward that way, even if you're looking around your environment. I would also like to mention that the game starts you off on very easy by default. I pretty much instantly brought it up to easy, and I never died once in my playthrough on easy. So if you've played VR games before, and certainly if you've played Fallout before, I think you'll have no issue bumping that up to easy or even normal. Just a minor heads up. However, if this is your first experience with a VR game of this sort, I would definitely recommend you play on very easy, at least for the first little bit of the game. Crafting is back, and it's in its full glory. When you customize a weapon, those customizations will appear on the gun and melee weapon that you choose. Settlement customization is back, and you can build everything that you would expect to build in the base game. I have two big gripes in this one. Number one, again, similar to the Pip-Boy, the trackpad feels very loose, so it's very easy to accidentally hit right on the trackpad rather than up. Which can get some getting used to and can cause some frustration. The other thing is you have to use teleportation when you're in the settlement crafting menu, and I hate the teleportation system. I think it's absolute garbage in this game the more I talk about it and think about it. Luckily, this is the only part of the game that forces you to use it. The dialogue system is back from the base game, so whenever you talk to an NPC, you have your 4 dialogue options as always. In order to choose a dialogue system, you put your thumb on the trackpad and either up, down, left, or right, and you push down on it, which is nice, because I never had a moment where I accidentally chose a dialogue option when I meant a different one. As well, you can also skip dialogue just by pushing down on the trackpad. Graphics-wise, the game looks fine. I didn't expect the game to look that great, and of course, it being a VR title, I expected them to scale things down a little bit. So because of this, you're gonna get some flat textures. It looks a little bit more pixelated, and if you look further than like 20 feet away from you, there's like this weird haze blur thing that happens. However, this graphical downgrade doesn't really take away from the amazing art direction and amount of detail that this game has. So even though this isn't the best looking VR title, it's also definitely not the worst. And I will also say that this game ran at a rock solid frame rate. I never had any dips, despite being in the downtown section of the game with the large buildings and complicated environments, or being in sections of the game with large firefights and lots of NPCs on the screen. Now I just want to quickly go over some of the minor gripes I had with the game. Nothing too bad, but just things worth mentioning. One of the very first things you'll notice about the game is you feel just a little bit shorter than all of the NPCs. So you know, when you're walking around your pre-war house, you're looking up at your wife, which is a little bit weird. So scaling seems to be just a little off. However, I'm sure that could be patched out relatively easily. As mentioned before, all of the menus you use are very loose when you're using the trackpad. As well, the select jumps back and forth between the trigger and just the center point on the D-pad. That just takes some getting used to though, so that's not really like something Bethesda needs to worry about. Another minor gripe I had is sometimes when you're in menus, for some reason that pop up in front of you, such as crafting or your perk chart, the game around you will go black for seemingly no reason. I guess maybe because you're standing in a certain spot or doing a certain thing. It's just takes it a little bit out of the immersion whenever it happens. Fortunately, in my game experience, I didn't really encounter too many bugs, especially no game-breaking bugs, which is a godsend. But many of the bugs I did experience were weird physics things, like whenever I shot an enemy and they died, sometimes they get flung up in the air, which is kind of funny, but really takes out of the immersion of the game. Lockpicking is weird in the game, in the sense that when you actually go to pick a lock, the lockpick animation appears in the environment and can get blocked by objects in that environment. So sometimes if you're picking a lock, you actually have to move your head in order to actually see what you're doing. As well, the lockpick also depends on the brightness of the environment. So if you're in a dark environment, the lockpick is going to look really dark, which can also be a bit of an issue. Lastly, the lockpick is also just really far away from you and it looks really small. An easy fix is just to bring it a little bit close, bring it way closer to your face and have it just be like this uniform lightness. That would fix that issue totally. Besides that, lockpicking works well enough. The same things go for terminal hacking, but to less of a degree. I never really had any issues, just sometimes the screen just appeared really, really dark. My last minor gripe with the game is that at the moment, there doesn't seem to be much in the way of mod support on the game, which is a little disappointing coming from a Bethesda PC title. However, Bethesda has said that there might be mod support later on in its development, so I'm hopeful that that'll be added in at some point. Now I want to mention the things that kind of really grinded my gears in this game, and the things that really aren't forgiving at all. First off, there's no DLC in this game, and Bethesda have been aggravatingly quiet about what that's going to look like in the future, whether or not that's going to be a free update, despite us having to pay full price for a game that many of us already own, or if it's just going to be implemented for free later on. Another thing that's really unforgiving is that at the moment, scopes do not work. If you were planning to play a sniper character, you can't. Reflex sights work. But just the fact that there's nothing for the scopes really kind of bothers me. I wouldn't even been that mad if there was like a button push and like your headset became the scope. Like I could have dealt with that at least. But the fact that there's nothing really doesn't look too good from a game that's already launched and is really something that Bethesda should have figured out prior to launch. I assume this is going to be something that's going to get patched later, but at launch, it's not there. Fallout 4, the base game, even had a lot of issues in and of itself, but it was better than the sum of its parts. And again, the art style and the environment and the world, it just draws you in so well. And being in the VR headset really just puts you into that world and adds so much to that immersion. It's just such a different experience to play it on virtual reality. It's such a unique experience that it's hard for me to recommend not picking this game up. As the player gets used to the controls and as some of these glaring issues get patched out, Fallout 4 VR will quickly become one of the best experiences you can have on the HTC Vive. And it is very difficult for me not to recommend picking this game up, even in its current state. It's just such a blast to play, and even once this review is done, I'm going to jump right back into this world, just keep on exploring the wasteland, experiencing this story and environment, and just keep having so much fun troping through the wasteland. Fallout 4 VR is absolutely worth getting if you have one of these. It's not a perfect game, and it may frustrate you in some portions of it, but it is undeniable just how much fun you are going to have in this game. So I hope you enjoyed my review of Fallout 4 VR. Yeah, after this review, I'm going to go play some more of it. It's kind of funny, my legs are super sore from even just playing for like 6 hours last night, but it doesn't really matter to me. The want for me to go and play this right now is stronger than my physical body. Steel with spaghetti legs. Ugh, sitting down is nice right now though.